Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss The Walk, starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Charlotte LeBon, Ben Kingsley, James Badge Dale, Clement Siboni, Caesar Doomboy, Benedict Samuel, Ben Schwartz, as in the voice of Sonic the Hedgehog, and Steve Valentine, directed by Robert Zemeckis. Now, before I get into this, I have seen this before, and I remember actually being kind of scary, but at the same time inspiring. And how do I mean by that? Let's get into the movie and talk about it. We open with Philippe Petit, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt with a French accent, as this is a biopic about him as he tells the story of why he put a wire in between the Twin Towers in New York City in the year 1974, as he tells the story starting in the year 1973 in Paris, France, where he's a wire artist with tricks. And I can never pull off as he looks for a dangerous place to hang his wire and attempt the impossible, like putting a ball in his mouth, for example, as he sees the Twin Towers in an article while at the doctor's office that he's going to attempt to walk on a wire later in the film, as it's a dream come true for Philippe. And I'm a Joseph Gordon-Levitt fan, and I really like his character as well as performance. But the French accent was a little hard to understand as we see him as a kid watching someone walk on a rope, which is an incredibly dangerous stunt. And kudos to Robert Zemeckis, the director, making the star Joseph Gordon-Levitt pulling off the stunts the real Philippe Petit did without getting killed. Philippe is about to walk on the rope until Papa Rudy, played by Ben Kingsley, tells him to get down and sees his moves and believes he has talent. And they practice some things until Philippe disrespects him and is thrown out and is kicked out of his house by his father. And we get him thinking about his next wire trick and sees Annie, played by Charlotte LeBon, singing while people love his wire trick, and he acts like a mime, and she goes along with it and says how much she doesn't appreciate doing tricks while she's playing music, and eventually walks away as it starts to rain. And Philippe introduces himself to Annie, and he wants to go out with her and asks the old-fashioned way, as he tells her his plan to go to New York for his wire purposes, as they kiss, which felt a little too early for a first date. And I liked her character as well as the other characters when we get to them later in the movie. Philippe makes Annie practice his wire with him and meets and befriends Jean-Louis, played by Clement Siboni. And while talking, Philippe's wire breaks down and comes back to Papa Rudy and wants to learn more about wire walking. And he practices every single day as he almost falls down to his death, and luckily he makes it without falling down, and Papa Rudy makes Philippe perform his work at the lake while a carnival happens at the same place as a fishing contest, with people going fishing distracting him, and gets in the water as it was a failure and walks on a wire at Notre Dame. And the cinematography is gorgeous, as this is a very good-looking movie, in my opinion. Philippe performs a wire in Notre Dame as it was a success, but he gets arrested by the cops as they don't appreciate his art, and he and Annie pack their things after learning the Twin Towers is almost complete, and they go to New York City and see it in person. As he looks up, this is when it scares me, the bejesus out of me. And there were times, especially when I get to the end of the movie, it scared me, as a worker makes the door slide slowly, and Philippe goes upstairs and gets the idea of walking on a wire in between the Twin Towers. As he looks down, and that scared me, like I was afraid he was going to die, and he's led to believe it's impossible, but he'll do it anyways, while Philippe, Annie, Papa Rudy, and Jean-Louis moving to New York, as they speak only English in America, as they want to sound like New Yorkers. And at one point in the beginning of the movie, they spoke English and some French, but they have to speak English while in America, and they argue about how impossible it sounds as Philippe apologizes and talks with Papa Rudy, and the acting in this was pretty good throughout. Papa Rudy gives Philippe some money, and they hug it out, and we get to a grassy area with Philippe and Annie practicing as he meets Jean-Francois, aka Jeff, played by Caesar Doomboy, as they test a way to shoot the wire in between the Twin Towers, as they officially become American citizens, and he becomes different civilians in disguise. and gets photographs of where to go for the big event, while Felipe accidentally steps on a nail without watching where he was going and gets it stitched up, and he walks in crutches, and a man named Barry Greenhouse, played by Steve Valentine, recognizing him, excuse me, from earlier in the movie, as he works at the building who saw him in Paris earlier in the film. And this is a pretty good biopic about a man who pulls off a very dangerous stunt back in 1974, as there was a documentary from 2008 called Man on Wire about a particular story in which I have yet to see. Jean-Pierre and JP, or JP for short, played by James Badge Dale, whom I reviewed before in Iron Man 3, and Martin Scorsese's The Departed, working at the store, and joins them while the next day is the big day, as Felipe goes over the plan while nobody pays attention in the middle of the night. Felipe makes all sorts of noises, and Annie tries to calm him down, and he's excited, but at the same time he's exhausted. And he wakes everybody in the crew up and says thank you to them. And they're in a van to get prepared for the big moment at the Twin Towers, as they put some things in Barry's office in the Twin Towers as they get caught by security, and they get left behind and talk to the manager about letting it up. And they wait it out and eventually take it to the roof, as the movie is a little too long, as they have to go through the plans for the 2 hours of the 2 hours that this movie is. They get to the roof and put their delivery there, and a wheel breaks it off, but it's no big deal as they break the box open and set up the wire, and one of them hears a security guard as they hide, and luckily they don't get caught, as it was intense, and there were times this movie scared the bejesus out of me, which was effective. Felipe sees the walkie-talkie abandoned without the security guard, as they eventually get out of there and see the view at nighttime and shoot the wire at the other side of the Twin Towers. And what scared me was if they were going to get it done successfully or not. But the shot looked terrific, as this movie was filmed for 3D, as it works on that level, while Felipe tries to get naked so they can see him, but they already shot the wire and it almost falls, but Felipe catches it. If they get the wire set up, and while Annie stays behind and GP goes back to the apartment, as Felipe hears his accomplices on the radio as a security guard does a check on the roof, until he gets a call, and whew, that was close. And they continue with the wire setting up, and this scene was intense, as I was on the edge of my seat for the next 30 minutes until it is all done. JP comes back while Annie is down there, and Albert, played by Ben Schwartz, who will be the voice of Sonic the Hedgehog 5 years after this movie, quits them, and they prepare for the big stunt, as the guy who's afraid of heights comes out and holds the wire while they see someone coming up, as he just lets them go, which was random, and he puts his costume on while he's on top of the Twin Towers and almost falls. And the reason it scares me to death is because I'm afraid of heights in general, like the character that's out there with Felipe, as he hugs him for good luck, and Felipe goes out there to walk on the wire in between the Twin Towers, and this is when I get really nervous at this point. Let's talk about it in the next subject. Felipe gets out of the middle of the wire with something to hold on as a shift to his weight, and Annie, JP, and Barry watch Felipe perform his stunt, as people watch from the ground and see his trick while Felipe performs it, and his accomplices get photographs while people are cheering for him as he gets to the other side and continues to walk on the wire. As I wouldn't go out there, period. Because for one thing, I'm afraid of heights, like I said before. And the other thing is, I'm afraid to fall to my death. While his bloody foot is bleeding on one of his shoes, and performs a position as the entire block is watching, and a couple of cops show up and try to get him off as he gets closer to them, and the cops believe Felipe is suicidal. But he keeps performing his stunt, and this is just too perilous to watch, as I'm getting scared at this point, as does the cops. The cops come to both sides of the Twin Towers, and Felipe continuously fools them and lays down on the wire as more cops come, and while people are watching from the ground, and a bird is coming towards him and flies past him and finishes walking on the wire, as the wire breaks on him and a helicopter approaches, threatening to cut the wire off. And he gets back before the wire breaks, and Felipe introduces himself to the cops while the crowd cheers for the stunt. And they get him on the ground, and they get the wire off, and they cut the wire off carefully. And the cops take Felipe in a private place, and a cop says that took guts, as he says, good job, and it was a miracle he didn't die at this point in his life. As the news interviews Felipe, while Papa Rudy is very happy about it, and they go to a Chinese restaurant after the whole thing is finished to celebrate their success. And he stays in New York to become a New Yorker while everyone else left Felipe behind, even Annie, and they say their goodbyes to each other. And Felipe can go to the Twin Towers as many times as he likes, as long as he never crosses in between them ever again. And he pictures the wire in his mind, and the climax was a miracle, but it scared me more than horror movies do. But how much did it scare me? Let's see about it in a rating. I'll give this movie a 7.3 out of 10. I'm a Joseph Gordon-Levitt fan, and I really liked his character along with the others in his performance, but the French accent was a little hard to understand, and kudos to director Robert Zemeckis and making the star Joseph Gordon-Levitt pulling off the stunt the real Felipe Petit did in real life without getting himself killed, and the cinematography is gorgeous, as this is a very good-looking movie. The acting was pretty good throughout, as this is a very good-looking movie, like I just said, and this is a pretty good biopic about a man who pulls off a dangerous stunt back in 1974. As there was a documentary in 2008 called Man on Wire about this story, in which I'm going to have to see one day. And it is kind of a long movie, but I accept it, as they have to go through the plan and at this pace, so it makes sense. It was intense at times, and there were also times some of the movies scared the bejesus out of me, as it was effective. And this is a recommendation for this movie, as it tells the story quite well in my opinion. And the narration by Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Philippe Petit narration did work for this movie, as I was on the edge of my seat for the last 30 minutes because of the heights of the Twin Towers until it was all done, as that was how intense it was, and it works. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for this review, and until then, don't walk on wires in between tall buildings like that. It's dangerous, kids.